The text came in at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, and I read it 3 times before I accepted that the words actually said what they said. My mother had written, "We've decided to raise your rent to $1,900 starting the 1st of next month. We hope you understand. This is what the market supports, and we need to be fair to ourselves. $1,900. I was paying $800. I had been paying $800 for 4 years in the house I had moved into when I was 26 because my parents had asked me to, because they needed a reliable tenant and I needed a place to land after my divorce, and because the agreement had been verbally clearly more than once that my rent would stay manageable while I got back on my feet. $1,900, more than double. And it was coming into effect in 30 days. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark and I read the text a 4th time, and then my phone rang, unknown number. And the woman on the other end of the line said she was calling from a bank in my state, and that she was calling about a mortgage account, and that she needed to verify that I was aware of the loan that had been taken out using my name as a cosigner. I had not signed any loan. I had not been asked to sign any loan. I had not co-signed anything in 4 years. And yet, according to the woman on the phone, a home equity line of credit had been opened 6 months earlier on the property where I lived, with my name on the paperwork, and 2 payments had been missed, and the bank needed to know how I wanted to proceed. I sat on the edge of that bed for a long time after I hung up, and I thought about a lot of things. I thought about my brother. I thought about the conversation my parents and I had never had about what was really happening. And I thought about the fact that I am a paralegal, and that I work with documents and legal language every day, and that the words on that loan paperwork were about to become the most important words any of us had ever signed. They had made a mistake. They did not yet know they had made it. But I did. Welcome to the Revenge Diaries. If you are new here, subscribe now and hit that like button. And before I go any further, I want to ask you something in the comments. Have you ever found out that someone used your name for something without telling you? Just drop a yes or no. I'll be reading every single one. Now let me take you back. My name is Carver. I am 34 years old. I work as a paralegal for a civil litigation firm in Cincinnati, Ohio. I am methodical by nature and by training. I keep records. I read everything before I sign it. I know what documents mean, and I know what they cost people when they are misused. My parents, Robert and Gail Carver, are 61 and 59 years old, respectively. My father spent 30 years as a manager at a paper distribution company. My mother worked part-time as a dental hygienist and spent the majority of her adult life as the organizational center of our family. They are not bad people in any simple sense of the word. They are people who made a series of decisions that they justified in ways that made sense to them and that had consequences they did not fully think through. My brother Marcus is 31. He is 3 years younger than me, louder than me, and had always occupied a different position in our family's emotional architecture. Not because my parents preferred him in the way that word implies active cruelty, but because Marcus needed more attention, more rescue, more intervention, and because I had always needed less, or appeared to need less, and the difference over 30 years had calcified into something that looked a lot like a 2-tier system. I was the capable one. Marcus was the one who required managing. And what I had never fully understood until that Tuesday night was that being the capable one had a price, and I had been paying it for years without knowing the full amount. I moved into my parents' rental property, a 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood 15 minutes from downtown Cincinnati, in the spring when I was 26. I had been through a divorce that had cost me financially and emotionally more than I want to count here, and my parents had offered me the house at $800 a month, significantly below market rate, as a way of helping me stabilize. They said it clearly. "We want to help you get back on your feet, Joel. The rent will stay manageable while you do that." I had 2 witnesses to that conversation, my aunt, who was visiting that weekend, and Marcus, who was sitting in the kitchen eating cereal when my parents said it, and who nodded along, as if it were the most reasonable thing in the world. For 4 years, I was an ideal tenant. I paid on the 1st of every month, without exception, via bank transfer with a paper trail. I handled minor maintenance myself. I replaced a garbage disposal, patched drywall in the hallway after a pipe drip, repainted the back fence when it started peeling. I mowed the grass in summer and dealt with the gutters in fall. I was never late. I was never a problem. I was the tenant you want when you own a property. And for 4 years I believed because they had told me that the arrangement was stable. Marcus's situation had been sliding for about 18 months before that Tuesday night. He had lost a job, not for the first time, at a logistics company where he had been working as a floor supervisor. He had then tried to launch a small landscaping business that had not gained traction. He was living in an apartment in a suburb on the east side that cost him $1,200 a month, and he was struggling to make the rent. I knew pieces of this because my mother mentioned things in passing on phone calls. What I did not know was the full shape of what my parents were planning to do about it. The plan, as I pieced it together later, was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its implications. Marcus needed a cheaper place to live. The house I was renting had 3 bedrooms, a yard, and was currently occupied by one person paying $800 a month. If they raised my rent to $1,900, more than doubling it, pricing me out, I would leave. Marcus could then move in at whatever rate my parents decided was appropriate for a son versus a tenant. The rental income they lost on the spread could be considered, in their framing, a form of family support, practical, efficient, and requiring absolutely nothing from Marcus in exchange for the displacement of his older brother. It was the kind of plan that works perfectly if you forget that your older brother is a paralegal who reads documents for a living. The bank call changed everything, because the bank call meant that whatever else my parents had done, they had done something that crossed a line that was no longer about feelings or fairness or family dynamics. They had put my name on a financial instrument without my consent, and that was not a family matter. That was a legal one. I did not sleep that night. I lay on my back in the dark, and I made a list in my head of everything I needed to do before anyone in my family knew I had received that phone call. First, I needed to get the loan documents. Second, I needed to understand the full scope of what had been signed. Third, I needed to talk to an attorney, not a colleague, not someone at my firm, but an independent attorney who had no connection to my professional life. Fourth, I needed to say absolutely nothing to my parents, Marcus, or anyone in my family until I understood exactly what I was dealing with. I am a paralegal. I know that the first rule of a legal situation is that you do not talk about a legal situation until you know what you have. Monday morning, I called the bank back. I identified myself, confirmed the account number they had given me, and requested a full copy of the loan documentation. The bank representative, a patient woman named Daria, walked me through the process. The loan was a home equity line of credit on the property at the address where I lived. It had been opened 6 months earlier. My name appeared on the paperwork as a cosigner. My signature, or what appeared to be my signature, was on page 7. I asked Daria to tell me the date the loan had been executed. She gave me a date in April. I had been in Chicago on that date, attending a 3-day deposition prep for a case at work. I had receipts, hotel records, and a client billing log that placed me 250 miles from Cincinnati on that exact day. The signature on page 7 was not mine. I want to pause here because I know what you are thinking. You are thinking, how? How does something like this happen? How does a parent put their adult child's name on a loan document without that child's knowledge? I am going to tell you that the answer to that question took several weeks to fully emerge and several more to fully accept. But the short version is, I had 3 years earlier given my father a limited power of attorney to handle a specific property-related matter during a period when I was out of the country for 6 weeks on a work assignment. The power of attorney was narrow. It covered a specific transaction and expired automatically at the conclusion of that transaction. My father had not returned the original document, and someone, I will not speculate on exactly who, though I have my understanding, had used that document outside its scope and after its expiration to execute the co-signature on the loan. A document I had never seen, a debt I had never agreed to, an obligation that was, as of that Tuesday night, 2 payments behind. I retained an attorney independently. Her name was Carol Ashby, and she worked at a firm that handled financial fraud and elder law, which I found through a bar association referral. I chose her specifically because she was not in my professional network. I did not want my employer involved. I did not want colleagues involved. I did not want the situation to bleed into my work life before I understood its full dimensions. Carol was 53 years old, had been practicing for 26 years, and had a manner that I would describe as methodical warmth. She cared about getting things right. She also had, by her own description, very little patience for the misuse of power of attorney documents, which she said were the #1 instrument of financial exploitation in her area of practice. I brought everything to Carol's office on a Wednesday afternoon. The text from my mother about the rent increase. The bank call notes I had documented immediately after hanging up. The original power of attorney I had given my father, which I had kept a copy of in my own files because I am a paralegal and I keep copies of everything. The hotel receipts and billing logs proving my location on the day the loan was executed. Carol read everything methodically in the order I presented it, without speaking. When she finished, she looked up and said, "Joel, this is not a gray area." She said the signature on the loan document being a forgery or the product of a power of attorney used outside its scope and past its expiration was a serious matter with criminal as well as civil dimensions. She said I needed to make some decisions about how I wanted to proceed, and that she wanted to make sure I understood all of my options before I made any of them. I told her I was listening. The options were these. First, I could do nothing beyond protecting myself, contact the bank, dispute the debt, clear my name from the loan, and absorb the rent increase or leave the property. Clean and quiet, minimal confrontation, but leaving real harm unaddressed and leaving myself potentially exposed to credit damage that could take years to fully resolve. Second, I could engage in a civil process, file a civil action for financial fraud and misuse of the power of attorney, which would surface everything in a documented legal record. Third, if the evidence supported it, Carol could refer the matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal investigation, which would take the matter entirely out of my hands and into the jurisdiction of the state. She laid out all three. She told me there was no wrong answer. She told me to take the weekend. I want to stop here and ask you something directly. If you were sitting across from an attorney who just told you that your parents had potentially committed financial fraud against you, what would you do? Would you protect them? Would you protect yourself? Would you let the legal process go wherever it needed to go? I want to know your answer in the comments, genuinely, because the answer I arrived at over that weekend is the thing that decided the next 6 months of my life. And it was not a simple answer, and I want to be honest about that. I spent the weekend alone. I did not call my parents. I did not call Marcus. I called my aunt, my mother's sister, a woman named Vivian, who had always been the person in my family who told the truth, even when nobody wanted to hear it. I did not tell her about the loan. I told her about the rent increase. I read her the text and listened to the silence on the other end of the phone. Aunt Vivian said, "Joel, I need to tell you something I probably should have told you sooner." She said she had been at my parents' house the previous month for Sunday dinner and had heard my parents and Marcus in the kitchen having a conversation they did not know she could hear. She said Marcus had said directly that if the rent went up high enough, Joel would leave, and then Marcus could move in and he would just pay them whatever he could. She said my mother had said, "We'll work it out, we always do." She said my father had not responded. She said she had gone home and wrestled with whether to tell me and had not decided until this call. I thanked her. I wrote it down. I added it to the folder. Monday morning, I called Carol Ashby and told her I wanted to pursue option 2, the civil route. Not the criminal referral, not yet. I wanted to give my family the opportunity to understand what they had done and to respond in kind before I handed anything to a prosecutor. Carol said she understood and that it was a reasonable place to start. She began drafting a formal demand letter. The demand letter would go to my parents, addressed to both of them via certified mail with return receipt. It would lay out the facts of the loan document, the forged or improperly obtained signature, the expired and out-of-scope power of attorney, the 2 missed payments, the bank notification, and it would demand within 30 days full removal of my name from the loan, documentation of the bank's correction of my credit record, and a written acknowledgement of the circumstances under which the document had been executed. The letter did not threaten criminal referral. It simply stated facts and made demands. Carol said sometimes a letter is enough. Sometimes people see the shape of what they have done when someone writes it down in formal language. The certified mail was delivered on a Thursday. I know because I tracked it. The return receipt came back to Carol's office on Friday morning. My mother had signed it. I imagined her at the mailbox. I imagined her opening the envelope. I imagined the specific moment when the words Carol had written became real in a way that the Tuesday night text message had never anticipated. I felt something in that moment that I want to name accurately. It was not satisfaction, it was grief. Clear, specific, not dramatic grief for the version of my family I had believed in, and was now looking at through a very different lens. But underneath the grief, steady and unmistakable, was something else. The feeling of a person who knows exactly where they stand. My father called me that Friday evening at 6:14. I know the time because I still have the call log. He said, "Joel, we need to talk about some paperwork." I said, "Dad, I think my attorney would prefer that this conversation go through her at this point." He said, "Joel, come on. This is family." I said, "I know it is, Dad." And I let that sit in the air for a moment. And then I said, "My attorney's number is in the letter. Please have your attorney contact her directly." He said, "We don't have an attorney." I said, "I would strongly recommend getting one," and I ended the call. My mother called Saturday morning. She cried. Not manipulatively. I want to be honest about this, because my mother's tears have always been real, and I believe they were real on that Saturday morning too. She said she had not understood what the document was. She said my father had handled it and she had trusted him. She said they had not thought it would cause me harm. She said Marcus was struggling and they did not know what else to do. I listened to all of it. I did not interrupt. And when she finished, I said, "Mom, someone signed my name on a legal document. I need that to be corrected. Everything else we can talk about when that is done." She said, "Is there any way we can handle this without a lawyer?" I said, "There may be, but that depends on what happens next." I ended the call. I wrote down the time and the substance of the conversation. I added it to the folder. Marcus called Sunday. I had expected this. He called at noon, the time he always called on Sundays when he wanted to seem casual about something urgent. He said, "Bro, I don't know everything that's going on, but I just want you to know I didn't have anything to do with the paperwork stuff." I said, "Okay." He said, "I just needed a place and Mom and Dad said they could work it out." I said, "Marcus, I know you needed a place. I understand that, but I need you to understand that the way they tried to work it out has my name on a loan I did not agree to." Silence. "Then I didn't know that." I said, "I believe you." And I did believe him. Marcus is many things, but he is not sophisticated enough to have conceived of this. This was my father's doing, and possibly with my mother's passive cooperation, and Marcus had been the beneficiary of it, in the same way children are sometimes the beneficiaries of things done in their name that they would not have chosen if they had been fully informed. 3 weeks after the letter was delivered, Carol received a response. Not from an attorney, my parents had not retained one, but from my father directly, typed on a piece of paper and mailed in an envelope, which Carol said was not the recommended method of response, but was technically a response. My father's letter acknowledged that the loan document existed. It acknowledged that my name appeared on it. It stated that he had believed the power of attorney covered the signing of the document and had not understood that it had expired. He did not use the word forgery. He did not use the word fraud. He said he was sorry for the confusion and that he intended to correct it. Carol said the letter was both legally useful and humanly insufficient. She said the intent acknowledgement, however soft, was something we could work with. She said the next step was to contact the bank directly with documentation and begin the process of disputing and removing my name from the loan. The bank process took 7 weeks. It was not dramatic. It was paperwork, which is what most real legal matters actually are. Carol submitted the documentation of the expired power of attorney, the evidence of my location on the date of execution, my father's letter acknowledging the circumstances, and a formal dispute of my cosigner status. The bank's fraud department reviewed the file. They found the documentation compelling. They escalated it to their legal team. At week 6, they sent a formal letter to Carol's office stating that my name was being removed from the loan, that the account would be restructured under my parents' names only, and that a correction notice had been sent to all 3 major credit bureaus to remove any negative impact from the 2 missed payments. Carol called me when she received it. She said, "It's done, Joel." I said, "Thank you." And I sat at my desk at work for about 2 minutes just breathing. Now, here is the part of this story that I think surprises people most. Because you might expect that at this point I would pack my things and leave the house and never speak to my parents again. Or that I would confront them at a family dinner and release everything I had been holding. Or that I would find some dramatic, visible way to mark the moment when the score was settled. I did none of those things. What I did was this. I sent my parents a certified letter, not from Carol, from me, typed on my own letterhead, clear and unemotional, that stated 3 things. First, that my name had been successfully removed from the loan and my credit had been corrected. Second, that I would be vacating the property at the end of the following month, giving them 30 days notice as required by Ohio tenant law. Third, that I had spoken with my employer about a relocation opportunity in Columbus that I had been considering for some time and had decided to accept. I was not being driven out. I was leaving on my terms, on my timeline, with everything documented and settled. The rent increase had never gone into effect because I had never paid it. Not once. My $800 payment had gone out on the first of the month as always, and I had sent a certified letter to my parents the week after the initial text, informing them that I was disputing the increase on the grounds of the verbal agreement made at the time I moved in, and that I would continue paying the agreed rate until the tenancy concluded. They had not challenged it. They had been too busy managing what the demand letter had started. The bank process took 7 weeks. It was not dramatic. It was paperwork, which is what most real legal matters actually are. Carol submitted the documentation of the expired power of attorney, the evidence of my location on the date of execution, my father's letter acknowledging the circumstances, and a formal dispute of my cosigner status. The bank's fraud department reviewed the file. They found the documentation compelling. They escalated it to their legal team. At week 6, they sent a formal letter to Carol's office stating that my name was being removed from the loan, that the account would be restructured under my parents' names only, and that a correction notice had been sent to all 3 major credit bureaus to remove any negative impact from the 2 missed payments. Carol called me when she received it. She said, "It's done, Joel." I said, "Thank you." And I sat at my desk at work for about 2 minutes just breathing. Now, here is the part of this story that I think surprises people most. Because you might expect that at this point I would pack my things and leave the house and never speak to my parents again, or that I would confront them at a family dinner and release everything I had been holding, or that I would find some dramatic, visible way to mark the moment when the score was settled. I did none of those things. What I did was this: I sent my parents a certified letter, not from Carol, from me, typed on my own letterhead, clear and unemotional, that stated 3 things. First, that my name had been successfully removed from the loan and my credit had been corrected. Second, that I would be vacating the property at the end of the following month, giving them 30 days notice as required by Ohio tenant law. Third, that I had spoken with my employer about a relocation opportunity in Columbus that I had been considering for some time and had decided to accept. I was not being driven out. I was leaving on my terms, on my timeline, with everything documented and settled. The rent increase had never gone into effect because I had never paid it. Not once. My $800 payment had gone out on the first of the month as always, and I had sent a certified letter to my parents the week after the initial text, informing them that I was disputing the increase on the grounds of the verbal agreement made at the time I moved in, and that I would continue paying the agreed rate until the tenancy concluded. They had not challenged it. They had been too busy managing what the demand letter had started. To be seen had been seen. The thing that needed to be said had been said. The thing that needed to be corrected had been corrected. And I was walking out with my name clean, my credit intact, and the knowledge that when it mattered, I had done everything correctly. My relationship with my parents is in a period I would describe as careful reconstruction. My mother and I speak on the phone twice a month. The conversations are slower than they used to be and more honest in a way that is sometimes uncomfortable and always better than the alternative. She said something to me in September that I wrote down because I wanted to keep it. She said, "I don't know when we started thinking that doing things for Marcus meant it was okay to do things to you." I read that line back sometimes. I don't know when we started thinking that doing things for Marcus meant it was okay to do things to you. That is the most precise description of what happened that I have heard from anyone. I told her I appreciated her saying it. She said, "I should have said it a lot sooner." I said, "Yeah," and we moved on to talking about other things. My father and I have not had the full conversation yet. We have spoken 3 times since I moved. The conversations have been short and careful, like people navigating around something large that is sitting in the middle of the room. I think he is waiting for me to either forgive him completely or confront him completely, and I am not ready to do either. What I am ready for is the slower, more honest version, the one where the thing that happened is named correctly, and the reasons are examined without excusing them, and something real is built in the aftermath. I believe that version is possible. I am not yet certain, but I am patient in the way that people become patient when they have learned that the best outcomes come from precision rather than speed. Marcus moved into the house after I left. He is paying, I am told, $600 a month. Our parents are subsidizing the difference from their retirement savings, which is their choice and their money and not my concern. Marcus and I have had 2 conversations since I moved. He called me in October and he said, "I'm sorry for what happened." I asked him what specifically he was sorry for. He said, "For being the reason they did it." I said, "Marcus, they made their own choices." "You didn't make them for them," he said. "Still." I said, "Yeah." And that was the most honest exchange we have had in years, maybe in our adult lives. I am not close to Marcus in the way brothers can be close, but I do not hate him. He is a person who needed help and accepted it in the form it came, without looking hard at what the form required. That is human. It is not admirable, but it is human. The power of attorney documentation I had given my father, the original, which I had never received back, was returned to me in an envelope from my parents' house in December. No, just the document, in a regular envelope with my Columbus address written in my father's handwriting. I held it for a moment, and then I shredded it, not dramatically. On a Tuesday evening after work, Hugo watched from the couch, and then I made dinner and watched television and went to bed. Ordinary life continuing, which is what I wanted all along. I have learned things from this year that I want to tell you directly because I think they are things that are worth saying out loud and not leaving implied. The first is that being the capable one is not the same as being the designated one. Your reliability is not permission for other people to consume your resources without asking. The second is that documents matter. Every agreement that touches your finances, your legal identity, your credit, your property, get it in writing, keep a copy, know what it says and what it does not say, and when it expires. The third is that love and accountability are not opposites. I love my parents. I also required them to be accountable for what they had done. Those 2 things coexisted without contradiction. And the fourth, maybe the most important, is that the appropriate response to being wronged by people you love is not silence, and it is not destruction. It is precision. Document what happened, understand what it means, address it correctly. Give the people who did it the opportunity to correct it, and then make your decisions from a place of full information rather than from a place of either naivety or rage. $58,000 was the number Carol calculated as the exposure I would have faced on the loan if I had not caught the bank call, had not retained Carol, and had simply absorbed the missed payments as my obligation. $58,000 in potential liability. From a text message about a rent increase and a phone call at 11:47 on a Tuesday night that I almost did not answer. I answer every unknown number now. Hugo thinks I am eccentric. He is probably right. My name is clean. My credit is intact. My apartment in Columbus is exactly the size I want, and not 1 square foot larger. I have a savings account that goes up every month and a job I am good at, and a dog who does not require financial rescue on a recurring basis. I have a relationship with my family that is in the process of becoming something honest, which is harder than the version it was before, and also better in every way that matters. And I have a physical folder, in a filing cabinet in my 2nd bedroom, labeled resolved. The bank letter is in it. Carol's final invoice is in it. The return receipt from the certified mail is in it. The copy of my father's letter of acknowledgement is in it. My father's letter is in it. And on the front of the folder, written in black marker in my own handwriting, is 1 word. Resolved, not forgiven. Not forgotten, resolved. There is a difference between those things. And knowing the difference is, I think, the thing I am most grateful for from this entire year. If this meant something to you, please like this video, subscribe to the Revenge Diaries, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Someone who is in a situation where their name is on something they did not sign. Someone who is being asked to absorb costs that belong to someone else. Someone who is the capable one and has not yet realized that capable is not the same as obligated. And before you go, 2 things. First, drop your answer in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between protecting your family and protecting yourself? How did you decide? Second, next week on this channel, I am telling the story of a woman who discovered that her business partner had been filing taxes under her name for 3 years, and what happened when she walked into the IRS office with a folder full of documentation and a very specific kind of patience. You do not want to miss it. I will see you there.